The crypto space breathed a collective sigh of relief when this article came out. But like a lot of things in life, I'm afraid it's a little bit more complicated and nuanced than this. Ready? Let's go. The article we're about to discuss is based on information from an anonymous source who's supposed to be an official at Treasury. But it's a Bloomberg article, so I believe they definitely talked to some official at Treasury. It's probably highly reliable that they were talking to somebody, but it is anonymous, so take it with a grain of salt. Things could change. This anonymous official at Treasury says that the Treasury Department is going to issue guidance next week. And the guidance is going to say that only cryptocurrency companies that the Treasury considers to be brokers will need to comply with the tax reporting requirements. This is obviously to calm things down in the crypto space so that crypto's not afraid that Treasury is going to come in and impose these unduly burdensome tax reporting requirements on parties who actually don't have the data that would be required to comply. Here's the key thing, though. Even in this article, they say other firms key to the nearly $2 trillion crypto market, from developers and miners to hardware and software providers, won't have any requirements so long as they don't also act as brokers. So this is key. They throw around a bunch of terms here. They mention developers, which is one word that Treasury apparently absolutely would not allow to be in the compromise bill between all the senators involved in the Senate mayhem earlier this week. But they say developers, miners, hardware and software providers don't have to worry as long as they don't also act as brokers. And then this article says the guidance won't grant blanket exemptions based on how firms identify themselves, and instead will focus on whether a firm's activities qualify it as a broker under the tax code. So this is key and something very predictable. They don't care if you say you're a developer. They don't care what kind of hardware or software provider you say you are. If you're acting as a broker, if your activities qualify you as a broker, then they're going to call you a broker. What is this definition of broker? In Title 26, which is of the US Code, which is the Internal Revenue Code, at Section 6045, we see that symbol right there means section, in case you didn't know. Section 6045, we see returns of brokers. And of course, they tell us what they mean by broker under Section C definitions, subsection 1. And they throw around a few things you kind of expect: a dealer, a barter exchange. And then in C1C, we have the section that is of probably most relevance for crypto. C1C says any other person who, for a consideration, if you don't know what consideration is, that's pretty much anything of value. Any other person who, for a consideration, regularly acts as a middleman with respect to property or services. So you can see why Treasury, which is concerned with leaving itself an optimal amount of flexibility in enforcement, is super happy to tell crypto, hey, you're fine as long as you're not a broker. Because any other person who, for consideration, really acts as a middleman with respect to property, that's problematic. A person can be a natural person, like a human being, or it can be an entity of pretty much any type. So they're saying pretty much any human being or entity who acts as a middleman with respect to property, and gets paid for it. This is problematic because that property could be crypto assets. And there are a whole bunch of entities or persons in crypto who are acting as middlemen and getting paid for it with respect to crypto assets. Even in this very optimistically titled CoinDesk article, they have this little blurb at the very bottom: Treasury is reportedly planning to exempt non-broker parties on a case-by-case basis, a far cry from sweeping exemptions the industry sought. I think that's exactly right. That is exactly the wide-ranging flexibility in enforcement that Treasury would like to ensure for themselves. They would like to go through and take anybody who's getting paid to be a middleman in a crypto transaction, they'd like to go through and say, okay, not you, not you, not you. We're mad at you though, so you're definitely a broker. And the definition of person can be so broad that there's no guarantee that, say, a developer who creates a platform that does exactly what that broker definition describes, a, a developer who creates that platform, deploys it out into the world, and retains a bunch of governance tokens or something else for themselves that is designed to appreciate in value as usage of the platform increases. I think Treasury is maintaining for themselves here the ability to classify anybody they want like that as a broker. If they had no interest in that kind of thing, I think they would have been fine with including the word developer in that compromise amendment at the end of the day. But you'll notice the amendment from Portman Warner, the various versions of that amendment, which kept getting revised, and the eventual compromise amendment, which we know was negotiated with Treasury, none of those mentioned developer. The Wyden Lummis Toomey amendment, which none of the amendments made it, but the one that seemed to never have sign off from the other side, it always mentioned developer, but the compromise amendment did not. I think that's telling. There are definitely certain types of developers that Treasury would still like to be able to classify as brokers. We don't know exactly what those are, but I'm a little bit worried for developers who create a platform that does brokering, especially if they've granted to themselves or retained some type of a crypto asset, a governance token or something like that, whose value is like designed to correspond to use of the platform in those brokering activities. I don't think Treasury is necessarily going to say, oh, this is decentralized and you've paid yourself with these governance tokens, which are going to increase in value. That's totally fine. We're totally fine with that as long as you don't directly own the platform. I don't know that they're gonna see a distinction between decentralization there, like granting yourself the tokens up front, versus directly owning the platform. I don't know if they're going to see the same distinction there that a lot of people in crypto are hoping they'll see. We've already seen US regulators exhibit, I don't mean this pejoratively, but a lack of respect for that distinction intellectually. This is the letter that Gary Gensler, head of the SEC, sent back to Elizabeth Warren. In this letter, he says the American public is buying, selling, and lending crypto on these venues, both centralized and decentralized finance platforms. I believe these various platforms not only can implicate the securities laws, some platforms can also implicate the commodities laws and the banking laws. This raises a number of issues related to protecting investors and consumers, guarding against illicit activity, and ensuring financial stability. And then he goes through the same factors he laid out in the Aspen Forum speech he gave that we covered on this channel. He's pretty much saying, hey, we don't really care if they're centralized or decentralized. If we think these platforms are raising issues related to protecting investors and consumers, we're going to go after them. He talks specifically about lending platforms that might fall into SEC jurisdiction, and also devoted a couple paragraphs to stable coins. He summed everything up by saying, in my view, the legislative priority should center on crypto trading, lending, and DeFi platforms. So he says, if you're a platform that's trading crypto, lending crypto, or doing decentralized finance as a platform, he thinks the legislature should be figuring out ways to give regulators more authority and resources to go after them. So this is pretty all-encompassing. It's kind of hard to name something in DeFi that wouldn't fall, DeFi or sort of centralized finance of crypto, that wouldn't sort of fall into this. I mean, everybody's pretty much doing some kind of crypto trading or lending, or they might fall into the broad umbrella term DeFi. I mean, Gensler is basically saying we should go after everything financial, at least. You notice nowhere in here does he mention a specific blockchain. He never says, Like, I think Ethereum is a problem. I think Bitcoin's a problem. I think, you know, Algorand or Avalanche or Cardano are problems. They don't seem to be concerned about blockchains. Regulators don't seem at all to be concerned with blockchains. They get real excited over stable coins. They obviously think stable coins are a problem. They think trading is a problem because they believe there's trading of securities going on. They think lending is a problem. Crypto loans are a problem. And they think DeFi is a problem. I don't think you're going to see like regulators trying to shut down Cardano. What I think you're going to see is regulatory pressure in these areas that Gary Gensler is listing for you: trading, lending, and DeFi. This is nothing new. If you remember, the language we started out with in the infrastructure bill was this: any person who regularly provides any service or application, even if non-custodial, to facilitate transfers of digital assets, including any decentralized exchange. The language that obviously Treasury wanted, that was initially included in the infrastructure bill, specifically included decentralized exchanges. Not only are they unwilling to exclude DEXs and probably all of DeFi, but they specifically included DEXs in their original provision. That's what kind of kicked all of the Senate mayhem off. Not just the DEX part, but all of it. So I don't think this Treasury guidance, which we may get this coming week, is necessarily a boon to crypto. I think it's very possible that Treasury will come out and say, hey, we're not going to go after miners. And they might even say, we're not going to go after block validators, including miners and proof of stake block validators, stakers, and delegators, because they were willing to allow that in the compromise bill between the warring factions of senators. They were okay with that. So I think they're probably okay with all block validators. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they don't explicitly include proof of stake. We might see them just mention miners. They might not even mention proof of stake, and they'll just sort of leave us guessing, because their whole thing is they want to preserve, optimal, which in their case is like maximal enforcement flexibility. And I think what they want to do is exactly what this article identified at the end of the article, and that's sort of go through on a case-by-case basis and pick and choose winners. If they're mad at somebody, and that person is acting as a middleman in, crypto transactions, or a platform is, Treasury is going to be able to say, yeah, you're definitely a broker, right? And if they like somebody, they might say you're not a broker. So unless someone wants to challenge them judicially, or we see some additional legislative intervention, Treasury is basically going to be judge and jury. And it's very possible they come out and, make it very clear, either overtly or subtly, that they're going to say all the DEXs are brokers. In which case, we've got this practical problem where the DEXs are not going to have the data that would be required to comply with the tax reporting requirements of a broker. So we've got multiple possible executioners here who could show up. We could have Treasury declaring DEXs to be brokers, which would impose upon them these tax reporting requirements that they couldn't possibly comply with without KYCing the customers. And we've also got the SEC, which sounds like, it sounds like what they're gearing up to do is go after the lending platforms and and any platform that they think might be dealing in securities. And they, as we've discussed, they paint the world of securities with a pretty broad brush. It's the SEC. That's what they do. So I think we've got there are many different attack vectors here. And we've already seen it. We've already seen it happen sort of like across different levels of government with lending, in that what is there, like 5? Last time I checked, there were 5 different state regulators who were already going after BlockFi on their lending platform. We haven't seen that extend to DeFi platforms yet, but I wouldn't be shocked if we wake up some morning and these same state regulators who are going after BlockFi suddenly, start trying to figure out how they could possibly go after decentralized lending platforms as well. Talk to you tomorrow.